And if I look at the statistics, I get some of the basic ratios in there. Don't always rely on them because you don't exactly know how they calculate it, but as rough figures, you know what they are. Their equity, it's not available because they have negative equity. Or their book value is negative. So let's look at delta. In fact, I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to change it on the address. So I can go directly to where I was for that firm. They have a debt equity ratio of, you should not write that as a percent, but they did. Let's round it up, 258. That means in their assets, for each dollar of their own money, they have borrowed 257 or 258. It's a relatively high number. Okay? And on the other hand, let's look at one of their competitors, Southwest Airlines. I don't know who let them pick that ticker. Love. Oh, LUV, I'm sorry. That would be love. Yeah. As you can see, I'm really off today. What? To the extent possible, they let firms pick their own ticker, by the way. That's why Facebook has become Meta, because they chose that. And there's actually below 1. So for each dollar of assets, they owe only 13 cents essentially. Okay. And compared to 258 for what you want to call delta. Now, airline business is really risky business. If I'm a financial investor, I'm going to be more willing to buy, given the same sort of cash flows, expected cash flows. I'm more willing to buy Southwest than Delta. Why? Because the chances of Southwest going into financial distress is much less. Remember what happens to a firm, what happens to the shareholders when the firm declares bankruptcy. The common shareholders come last in the order of payments in a bankruptcy proceeding. The standard senior bondholders, the workers get their money first, and senior bondholders, junior bondholders, we're going to talk about those in chapter 6. Then if there are any preferred shares, and, oh, by the way, the first one is not workers, the first one is IRS. IRS gets their money first. And common shareholders, if there's anything left, they get something. I mean, in 99.9% of bankruptcies, common shareholders get zero. Nada. Zilch. Nichelo. Sifr. I can say zero in a lot of different languages. Noon. So as a shareholder, that kind of financial distress means I'm going to lose everything. So I don't want that risk. Nobody does. So if I have to choose between the two, and assuming I expect the same sort of business from them, I'm more willing to buy Southwest compared to Delta. That means, properly ratioed, the share price of Southwest is going to be much higher compared to Delta. If they were the same size, for example, or is a possible long-term creditor. And I'm a bank. Delta comes to me and wants to borrow money, and I'm going to look at their financial statements. I'm going to say I'm going to have to ask for some collateral, okay, or I'm going to charge you a lot of interest. If the customer is Southwest, I'm much more willing to do that. That means, when Murphy's Law becomes operational and crap happens, Southwest can go to a bank and finance their operations and weather the storm. Delta cannot. That makes a big difference. That's why I call that mother of all long-term solvency ratios. There are alternative ways you can write that number. One of them is called TDR, which is short for total debt ratio. If I remember it correctly, that's total liabilities divided by total assets. And you can actually write that in terms of DE. Let's say you have $1 of assets, and you have a debt equity ratio of 1. Well, let's say you have $1 of equity, okay? That implies total assets is equal to 1 plus that equity ratio, right? I have $1 of equity. The remaining comes from that equity, because if equity is 1, total debt is that equity ratio. So I can actually write this as, I'm going to also divide everything by total equity. Technically, I could do algebra and solve it, but I'm not going to. And given this setup, the top is simply that equity ratio, and the bottom is 1 plus that equity ratio. And if you want to solve for that equity ratio, given TDR, you can do that. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that equity ratio is TDR divided by 1 minus TDR. So they're equivalent representations of exactly the same phenomena. It's kind of looking at something from above or from below. The picture is exactly the same. How you perceive it may change. Some people, like looking at it from top, some people from below. For example, I can easily read writing upside down, but it's the same writing, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you don't have a choice about how that information is given to you, so you gotta be able to think about it. So if that equity ratio is high, so will TDR, and vice versa. So they represent exactly the same amount. I have 7 minutes. Let me stop here, because there are some solvency ratios that actually is related to interest payments. These called the coverage ratios. I'm just going to start on them fresh on Thursday. They basically say, what is your ability to cover the interest payments given what you're earning? So these are long-term solvency ratios that are calculated using income statements. But we'll talk about those on Thursday. Remember, quiz and homework are still there. On the quizzes, when you post them for the first time, Hey, you haven't done that well, I write some feedback to you. Some of you do it in 10 minutes and get a low score. That is not surprising. Spend some time on it. And if you want to ask questions, email me. Or if you really are having a hard time, just send me an email. We can do a Zoom call and go over stuff. I'm not going to give you the answer for a quiz you're doing right now, but I'll give you the pointers. But on quizzes that you have completed, we'll go through the whole solution. And remember those little videos I posted on additional stuff. There aren't that many views on them. So it's your business. I just create the tool. What you do with it is your issue. Just a second.